You ever watch someone stroll into your life like they own the place, smiling sweetly while sharpening the knife behind their back? That's exactly how Karen Henderson arrived at Maple Hollow Farm, the HOA president with a pearl necklace, a clipboard, and a sense of entitlement bigger than my entire property. I'd been living on my family's farm for over 20 years, keeping to myself. Cows, bulls, chickens, and quiet mornings. That's all I needed. My nearest neighbors were a good half-mile away, and that was how I liked it. But that peace didn't last, because one sunny afternoon, she arrived. Karen. Her SUV rolled up the gravel drive like it was parading down Fifth Avenue. She stepped out wearing spotless white sneakers and sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly feed bill. She didn't even knock, just marched right up to my porch and started talking before I could say a word. "Hello there," she sang, stretching her lips into a politician's grin. "You must be Mr. Carter. I'm Karen Henderson, president of the Maple Grove HOA. We're just thrilled to have your property adjacent to our community." Adjacent? That word twisted in my gut. My property wasn't adjacent to the subdivision. They built the subdivision right up to the edge of my land last year. What used to be acres of peaceful woods was now a maze of freshly paved streets and identical cookie-cutter houses. I gave her a polite nod. "I'm not part of your HOA, so whatever rules you've got." "Oh, I know," she interrupted, laughing like I'd told a joke. "But we like to keep the whole area looking presentable. We all share the same view, after all." Her eyes slid past me to my fields, golden grass swaying, the old barn, a few of my bulls lazing by the fence. She frowned slightly, like she'd spotted a stain on her designer rug. "I was just thinking," she continued, "maybe you could tidy up a bit? The fencing could use some paint, and that old sign by the road, well, it doesn't exactly scream welcoming." The sign she was talking about said private property, no trespassing. I crossed my arms. That sign's there for a reason. Karen's smile didn't falter, but her eyes turned cold. Of course. Just trying to be neighborly." She left soon after, but I could feel the storm brewing. Over the next few weeks, small things started happening. Someone trimmed the hedges along my fence without asking. My mailbox got replaced with one that matched the subdivision's theme. Flyers started showing up about community cleanup days. It was like she thought she owned me. Then one Friday afternoon, I came home from town and saw something that made my blood boil. 3 SUVs parked right inside my gate. Lawn chairs, coolers, a blanket spread out under my oak tree, a half-dozen women in sun hats and yoga pants sipping sparkling wine like they were at a country club. And right in the middle of it all, Karen. "Oh, hello," she said, waving like we were old friends. "We're just having a little picnic. I hope you don't mind. The community center was full, and your field looked so inviting." I stared at her, my jaw tight. "This is private property." "Oh, come on. It's just for the afternoon," she chirped. "We're not hurting anything." One of the women chuckled and raised her glass. "You should be grateful, Mr. Farmer. We're bringing some class to the place." My fist clenched. My father had built this farm from dirt and sweat, and now these people treated it like a park for their weekend escapades. I walked to the gate. "You all have 2 minutes to pack up and leave." Karen sighed like I was a stubborn child. "You know, Mr. Carter, you really should be more cooperative. This land could be beautiful if you just opened it up a little. Imagine the community events we could host. Kid could feed the animals. We could have photo days, maybe even a small farmer's market." I cut her off. "You have no right to be here." She looked me dead in the eye. "Well, I'm sure the county zoning board might think otherwise. After all, your fencing isn't exactly up to code, and your animals, those big bulls, they seem dangerous." The threat was clear. I didn't say another word. I just stood there until, one by one, her friends started awkwardly gathering their things. Karen was the last to leave, of course. She brushed grass off her pants and gave me a smile that could curdle milk. "We'll talk soon," she said. And she did. Constantly. Noise complaints. Smell complaints. Petitions about animal safety. The HOA even tried to get me to register my bulls as a public nuisance. Every week it was something new. Then came the final straw. It was a Saturday morning, just after dawn. I was fixing a section of fence near the north pasture when I heard laughter, the unmistakable sound of people. Again, I looked up, and there they were, Karen and a dozen of her friends, right back on my land. This time with kids, balloons, picnic tables, and a huge banner that read, Maple Grove Spring Social. They'd even set up a portable speaker, blaring pop music across my pasture. And there, beyond the fence, my bulls stood watching. Big, muscular beasts with curious eyes and short tempers. I froze for a moment. Then something inside me, something that had been simmering for weeks, snapped. I walked calmly to the gate. The women were too busy laughing and taking selfies to notice me. Karen spotted me only as I reached for the lock. "Oh, there you are," she said brightly. "I was just going to invite you to join us. We thought it'd be fun for the kids to see the animals." Click. I locked the gate. Then I turned, walked to the barn, and pulled open the side door to the bullpen. The air changed instantly. The bulls, 3 of my biggest, Titan, Moose, and Diolo, lifted their heads. I could almost feel their power vibrating through the ground. I opened the latch and stepped aside. They thundered out like a storm unleashed. Karen's laughter turned to a scream. Her friends scattered, grabbing their kids and running for the gate. But the lock was shut tight. Panic rippled across the field as the bulls charged through the picnic tables, knocking over chairs and coolers, scattering balloons into the sky. No one got hurt. Not really. The bulls were more interested in the food than the people. But to those HOA ladies, it must have looked like the apocalypse. When I finally strolled over and unlocked the gate, the last of them fled without a word. Karen was the only one who stopped, mud on her shoes, hair tangled, eyes blazing. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I smiled for the first time in weeks. "No, Karen, I think you will." Because what she didn't know was that I had everything on video. The trespassing, the banner, the event setup, every bit of it. The county sheriff was a friend of mine. We'd gone to school together. And he took one look at the footage and said, "Looks like you've got yourself an open-end shut case." But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Because when someone tries to take your peace, your home, your land, you don't just offend it. You make sure they never forget the lesson. So I started planning my revenge. And trust me, I wasn't going to let Karen off with just a scare. After all, she wanted a show. I was about to give her one she'd never forget. But how far can you go for revenge before you become the very monster you're fighting? That question haunted me long after the bulls stopped running. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but they never mention how much planning it takes, or how lonely the prep can be. After the picnic, when the dust and plastic cups had been swept into trash bags and the deputies had driven away, I sat on the porch and watched Karen's SUV disappear down Maple Lane. The farmhouse around me hummed with the ordinary life, hens clucking, wind in the corn, and I felt like I was standing in two worlds at once. The peaceful one I'd always known and the sharp-edged one Karen had forced onto me. I could have fired off a complaint, taken the HOA to court, or let my lawyer handle the rest. But that felt too neat, too tidy for what I wanted. I wanted more than legal paperwork. I wanted to peel back the veneer control she'd built and show everyone exactly who Karen Henderson was when she thought no one was watching. So I made a list, not of charges or claims, but of small, precise cuts, public truths that would sting more than any fine. The idea wasn't to harm anyone physically. It was to reveal the hypocrisy, the petty cruelties, the extent of her entitlement. I wanted her pride demolished. First, the footage. I had the video, Karen and her friends trespassing, the banner, their laughter. I made copies and labeled them. One I sent to the county zoning office with an anonymous note. Another I uploaded carefully to a local community forum under a username that smelled like impartiality. I knew the sheriff would handle the trespass legally, but public opinion moves faster than county hearings. The next move was quieter. I'd noticed, in the months leading up to that day, a pattern, little favors Karen seemed so fond of collecting. A free lawnmower tune-up here, a community discount for a new mailbox there. People donated things to the HOA and expected nothing in return. Karen expected gratitude in the form of influence. I started asking around, casually, in the hardware store, At the diner, stories emerged. A contractor who'd been promised preferred vendor status and then ghosted. A single mother who'd quietly been shamed at a meeting for letting her grass grow too tall. I collected the stories like a butcher gathers spice for curing meat. A little of this, a dash of that. Each tale on its own looked like imagination. Together they painted a portrait of a woman who used a volunteer title like a crown. At the next HOA meeting, which I attended after sending a public notice that the meeting would discuss community access to rural lands, the room was packed. Karen took the podium like a queen expecting coronation. Her smile was the one she wore on glossy brochures. She started with platitudes about safety and community values, but the air changed when someone from the back asked, "Were you aware the Henderson family used HOA funds for a private garden party last summer?" Heads turned. Karen's mouth tightened. She answered with a taut laugh and blamed a clerical error. That was mistake number one. I stepped up next. I didn't shout. I don't fancy myself an orator. I prefer the steady, plain speech of a man who's worked the land. But I had facts. I laid them out. The video link I'd posted 2 days earlier, it had gone semi-viral locally. The receipts for garden party rentals. The contractor who finally spoke up about the ghosting. The mother who, in tears, explained how Karen had bullied her at a meeting for daring to suggest a shared garden on unused HOA land. I didn't sensationalize. I let the evidence do the work. By the time I finished, the room was a mix of anger, confusion, and stunned silence. Karen's power came from consensus, and consensus was crumbling. She tried to retake control, of course. She accused me of harassment, of manipulating neighbors, of sowing division. Her words sounded practice. But the more she spoke, the more she sounded like someone trying to hold together a shabby fence with duct tape. The HOA board convened an emergency session. The sheriff, having reviewed trespass reports in the video, sent a formal notice. Karen and several others would be cited for trespassing that afternoon if they did not appear voluntarily to provide statements. For the first time since those houses went up, the homeowners had to confront the fact that the community Karen presided over was fraying. While the legal machine warmed up, I leaned into quieter humiliations. I reached out to neighbors I'd never met at picnics or community cleanups and asked one simple thing. Do you want your land to be respected? That question, asked not from a place of accusation but of invitation, brought people together. We organized a neighborhood meeting at the old Grange. We talked about land rights, about common sense and courtesy, about whether a small group of people should get to decide how an entire area behaves. People started to tell their stories in town. Minor tyrannies added up to a startling total. The HOA had been making informal rules, enforcing them selectively, and wielding social approval like a cudgel. Karen's name was on every complaint. The scale of resentment shifted from private grumbles to visible anger. Now, revenge isn't satisfaction. Even as a community turned and the sheriff's office did its job, I felt no triumph. I felt exhaustion. There's a weird loneliness of pulling a thread that unravels a tapestry. For every injustice you reveal uglier truths about everyone, including yourself. I had given them a lesson. In return, I'd pulled my neighbors into a fight with each other, and the farm that had once been my refuge was now the axis of a small civic war. Still, the payoff came in unexpected forms. Karen lost her presidency at the next board election. She lost more than that, though. The contractors who'd been stiff posted reviews. The local kids found the picnic video and remixed it into a meme that made Karen's carefully cultivated image look, for lack of a better phrase, ridiculous. Her friends whispered and stopped inviting her to neighborhood gatherings. Power, it turns out, is as fragile as a fence post in a flood. But life, being stubborn as clover, returned to its rhythms. I repaired the damaged fence, mended the gate, and put the sign back up with a fresh coat of paint. The bulls, Titan, Moose, Deerwillow, grazed as if nothing had happened, their great heads bowing to the earth. They were animals. They lived in a world of immediate needs and weather. They didn't understand human vindications. In that way, they were merciful. Their innocence meant that the one violent act I'd unleashed didn't become something worse. No one had been seriously hurt. No one had sought harm. It was chaos for an afternoon, but not a tragedy. Karen, however, kept trying to fight back. She sued, a frivolous, expensive case alleging defamation and harassment. Her lawyer demanded my footage and records. My attorney told her to bring an injunction if she dared. The court docket became a theater of wills. Depositions are boring in the way a mole's busy underground, slow, unseen, and containing all the small tremors that shatter things above. In deposition, when asked why I'd locked the gate and released the bulls, I spoke plainly. Because they were on my property, I said. Because I was tired of being treated as if my land was public property. I wanted to stop a pattern of disrespect. The judge later called it an act of property defense in the written opinion, legalese that tried to render something raw into a line item. The city fined Karen for allowing unauthorized events in a way that put children at risk. The HOA was forced to reevaluate their bylaws, their transparency, their enforcement practices. People had to admit that small jurisdictions without oversight breed small tyrants. That was the most important thing of all. The mechanism got fixed, not by me alone, but by 100 small indignations that had been allowed to fester until they demanded a reckoning. At home, I woke to quieter mornings. I visited the oak tree where the picnic had been, and found a scrap of pink ribbon still snagged on a low branch. I took it down and put it in my pocket. It felt like a relic, a tangible reminder that revenge, even when it lands, is not the end. It's a tone, a bend in a long road. Weeks later, Karen moved out of Maple Grove. She sold her house at a loss and left town with her pearls and her clipboard. People told me she'd moved to another subdivision where the yards were smaller and the rules firmer. I didn't celebrate. I felt only a complicated relief, like removing a burr from a favorite sweater. When the dust settled, neighbors started to do ordinary neighbor things again. They waved. They mended fences together. Someone began a small farmer's market on Saturday mornings. Volunteers, locals, fresh eggs and bread. And, I'll admit, a few of the old HOA families came down to buy a loaf. They didn't all apologize. Some simply fed their curiosity. I found myself selling jars of honey from a new patch of bees I'd taken to after the stress of the fight. The market attracted real interest. It didn't need a banner or permit, just honest people and a table. One late afternoon as I closed up the stand, a woman approached, the mother who'd once been bullied. She handed me a small jar of preserves. "For your trouble," she said, smile crooked. It was a small truce, and I liked it. So what had I learned in the aftermath? That revenge can restore balance but rarely peace. That standing up for yourself can cost you the quiet you crave. That sometimes the most effective revenge is to build something sturdy in the empty space left behind. I'd wanted to make Karen remember who she crossed. Instead, I became part of a larger fix, a neighborhood that learned the hard lesson that power needs accountability, and a farm that would be left alone, not because of fear, but because people had finally learned to respect boundaries. I still think about the question that haunted me after the Bulls' charge. How far can you go for revenge before you become what you hate? I'd walked the line. I'd unleashed animals and watched chaos. I'd exposed hypocrisy and watched a woman fall. I'd defended my land and, in the process, dragged my neighbors through ugliness. But as the sun set over the cornfields and the cows lowed in the distance, I felt, for the first time in months, a small, honest quiet that had nothing to do with someone else's defeat. It was a kind of silence that comes when chores are done and the house is warm and the wrongs, at least for now, are being righted. That, in the end, was enough.